The salt spray stung Elias's face, tasting of impending doom. He wiped it away, his dark skin glistening under the harsh glare of the midday sun. Elias, a young man barely out of his teens, with eyes that held the wisdom of generations of fishermen, watched the darkening horizon with a gnawing unease. He felt it in his bones, a shift in the wind, a prickling on his skin, a silent screaming emanating from the restless sea. The sea serpent, a proud schooner captained by the grizzled, stubborn Thomas Ainsworth, cut through the turquoise water towards its destination, the distant Spice Islands. Ainsworth, a man hardened by decades at sea, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by sun and wind, stood at the helm, his grip firm, his gaze fixed ahead. He was a creature of habit, of routines meticulously followed, of a self-assuredness bordering on arrogance. He trusted his charts, his instruments, his gut, and most of all, he trusted his own judgment. Elias, relegated to the lower ranks, cleaning decks and hauling ropes, had only been on board for 3 voyages. Yet he possessed a connection to the sea that transcended experience. His father, a legendary sailor from their small island home of Isla Perdida, had taught him the language of the waves, the secrets whispered by the currents, the warning signs painted across the canvas of the sky. It was an inheritance passed down through generations, a sensitivity woven into his very being. He hesitantly approached the quarterdeck, the domain of the captain. His bare feet patted softly on the freshly swabbed wood. He clutched the brim of his tattered cap in his hand, a sign of respect and deference. "Captain Ainsworth," he said, his voice barely audible above the creak of the ship and the shriek of the gulls. Ainsworth turned, his brow furrowed, his pale blue eyes narrowing as he focused on Elias. "What is it, boy? Don't you have decks to swab?" Elias swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "Captain, with respect, I believe we should change course." Ainsworth let out a harsh bark of laughter. "Change course? And why should I do that, Elias? Do you suddenly think you know more about navigation than I do?" Elias held his gaze, his brown eyes earnest. "The wind, it shifts. The sea feels restless. There's a storm brewing, Captain. A bad one. I feel it in my bones." Ainsworth scoffed, turning back to the helm. "Your bones? We're days away from any reported storm activity according to my charts, and the weather instrument reports coming in. Besides, the wind is in our favor. I am not changing my well-laid plans because a landlubber feeling like him is feeling it," Elias persisted, knowing he was treading dangerous ground. "But Captain, the sea here is tricky. That wind will shift any moment." Ainsworth's face hardened. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Enough, Elias. I appreciate that you are observant. This is mutiny. This is my ship and you are my deck boy. You are to follow orders without question and without spreading panic. Is that understood?" Elias knew he couldn't push any harder. The air around Ainsworth crackled with a simmering anger. He lowered his head. "Understood, Captain." He retreated back to the lower deck. The captain didn't even offer to listen properly. His unease deepened into a cold, leaden weight in his stomach. He knew he was right. He felt it. But he was just a dark-skinned young man on a ship where rank and skin color held far more weight than the wisdom of the sea. The day wore on. The wind, though still pushing them forward, became increasingly erratic, gusting in unpredictable directions. The sky, previously a brilliant blue, began to bruise with ominous gray clouds on the horizon. The waves, once gentle and playful, started to build in intensity, slapping against the hull with a growing ferocity. Elias watched with mounting anxiety. He saw the subtle signs that others, blinded by routine and deafened by arrogance, were missing. The frantic cries of the seabirds wheeling overhead, the unnatural stillness that would momentarily fall before a gust of wind, the way the foam on the waves seemed to cling to the air. He tried again. During his duty, he could pass a small message in person while passing the stairs leading to the captain deck. "Captain," he said, his voice laced with desperation, "please, I beg you, at least consider shortening sail. The wind will turn." Ainsworth, perched on his high seat watching the sky, said curtly, "No, boy, I am in charge. Keep at it. We will hit port on time for once." That night the storm broke. It arrived with the fury of a scorned god, unleashing its wrath upon the unsuspecting sea serpent. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the sails with savage force. Rain lashed down in sheets, blinding the crew and turning the deck into a treacherous, slippery surface. Waves, mountainous and merciless, crashed over the sides, threatening to swallow the ship whole. Panic erupted. The crew, ill-prepared and terrified, scrambled to secure loose cargo, to reef the sails, to bail out the water that was rapidly filling the hold. Ainsworth, initially defiant, now fought with grim determination to control his vessel. He barked orders, his voice strained and hoarse, but they were often lost in the deafening roar of the storm. Elias, driven by instinct and fueled by adrenaline, moved through the chaos with a quiet competence. He knew what needed to be done. He climbed the rigging, securing flapping sails with nimble fingers. He helped lash down cargo that threatened to break free. He guided frightened sailors to safety. He was a whirlwind of motion, a beacon of calm amidst the pandemonium. A young blonde sailor slipped in the surging waters on deck. "Help!" A strong gush of rain whipped towards him, and he barely opened his eyes to find the closest rope to pull onto. "Elias! Help!" He was drowning as they spoke. "No matter, I will never abandon you," he roared in between heavy exhales with a quick, reassuring gesture to give him comfort. He tied one of the cargo nets around the rail and jumped onto him, holding tightly with two strong hands, and with the two secured against the rails with a small improvised lifeline. He waited for a safe gush of waves to finally pass over, and with all the remaining strength drag him onto his knees and make his way to the stairs of the deck with safety. He risked his life when no one would listen. His wisdom prevailed where old pride couldn't reach, and only him. Elias saw Captain Ainsworth struggling at the helm, fighting a losing battle against the relentless force of the waves. A massive wave crashed over the stern, engulfing the captain and throwing him violently against the railing. Elias, without hesitation, fought his way through the deluge, his muscles burning with exhaustion, his mind focused on reaching the captain. He managed to reach the railing, pulling himself towards Ainsworth, who lay battered and dazed, struggling to regain his footing. "Captain!" Elias shouted, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "Hold on!" He extended a hand, his dark skin contrasting starkly against Ainsworth's pale, bloodied face. Ainsworth stared at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain, fear, and something that might have been regret. As Elias extended his hand closer, and his fate hanged on one hand while staring at Elias's and waiting, the wind howled, the ship groaned, and the storm raged on. The fury of the gale hadn't subsided. Every moment was another fight for survival, another desperate struggle against the relentless forces of nature. Elias's outstretched hand remained the sole thread between Captain Ainsworth and oblivion. The captain, however, didn't immediately seize it. His eyes flickered between Elias's outstretched hand and the churning chaos that awaited below. There was a battle raging within him. Pride versus survival, prejudice against desperation. The old world order collapsing under the weight of a storm that knew no rank or distinction. "Why?" Ainsworth finally rasped, his voice thin and reedy. "Why help me?" Elias, struggling to maintain his grip against the relentless spray, simply replied, "Because you are still the captain, and because that's what anyone should do." His tone left no room for excuses from the captain as the wind changed drastically and knocked Ainsworth onto one of his knees and the other resting on one of the riles, which caused more harm as that portion of railing splintered his legs even deeper. "Ah, grr!" Zrenia A, blood-thickening screaming, could be heard as his legs now was completely unusable and his sight blurry. Something seemed to crack within Ainsworth. Years of ingrained prejudice, a lifetime of unquestioned authority, seemed to crumble beneath the weight of the storm and the unexpected grace of the young man before him. His gaze softened, and his hand, gnarled and trembling, reached out to grasp Elias's. Their fingers locked together. It was a precarious connection, a lifeline stretched taut against the backdrop of roaring waves and shrieking winds. With a surge of strength born from adrenaline and necessity, Elias hauled the captain upright, dragging him away from the edge. But as the storm raged, a huge wave surged, completely submerging both the deck and Elias at that position. But due to their connection and locked fingers, The captain held on while gasping and using the wave surge as added momentum to launch his upper body past and rest again fully into the ship's interior, allowing both the grip of holding Elias to tighten around both, giving them leverage enough so both will not fall in with their next gasp into safety. Elias pushed onward to drag the captains with some degree of safety behind one of the overturned crates secured partially against a wall that will block them both, his movements sluggish due to his overall effort. He can no longer hear with what it can only be referred to exhausted silence. Not because he actually lost hearing, but it has now gotten past an overall state of adrenaline or desperation or drive that it can no longer make sense. "Help us all," is all he uttered, but the captain could hear his silent pray as only their eyes stared in complete awe for the moments given for relief. For a moment it didn't make sense anymore, if he wasn't worthy of respect anymore. If anything, Elias proved a new order in how situations must happen when an elder will allow guidance into saving both. Their salvation, however, was short-lived. The ship groaned again, the sound like the death throes of a dying beast. Another wave crashed over the deck, this one even larger than the last, tearing free the partially secured crate they took cover from and sending it hurtling across the deck and taking both again and submerged on top to what the captain saw an imminent future of their lives ending there. "No! Elias, it has ended me. She's breaking apart," someone screamed nearby. Elias dragged both behind to be again protected by some fallen cargo, blocking an upcoming hit again for them by momentum, and again used and reallocated an advantage that granted survival. And even against all odds, not even death wanted them, with persistence of Elias. He didn't need to be told. He felt it in the shuddering timbers beneath his feet, in the sickening lurch of the ship, in the increasing volume of water pouring into the hold. The sea serpent, battered and broken, was on the verge of succumbing to the storm's merciless onslaught. Elias glanced at Ainsworth, who was slumped against what was left of the railing, his eyes glazed with shock. He knew the captain was in no condition to help himself, and Elias had no idea what part of leg was struck, but a terrible sight was revealed in each glimpse into the interior leg from the corner side, blood vessels popping by so much exposure. A decision had to be made, and it had to be made quickly. There were a handful of lifeboats, enough for maybe half the crew. Reaching them, however, would be a perilous journey across the now treacherous deck. But the deck had partially submerged, with all the waves being too strong to manage now, with holes here and there, with what was referred now more like holes of the Titanic. Elias, not stopping at any cost, quickly did a reconnaissance in what seemed a logical conclusion, a better scenario for himself. "Captain, I need to leave to scout out where is everyone in and what our plans are. You just make do, I return soon." And not wanting any reply, he stood straight onward away from his location. He hoisted Ainsworth over his shoulders in a fireman's carry. It was a struggle given the captain's size and weight and the instability of the deck. His overall state of exhausted silence still played to keep him away to the despair. However, this silence was so much that if the adrenaline wears out, it will prove itself at a great cost of no motivation, that drive. And if that runs out, that means death is the answer he doesn't wish to find. He must persevere regardless how difficult. He staggered toward the direction of the lifeboats, moving with a grim determination. Each step was an agonizing effort. Each wave that washed over them threatened to sweep them away. Yet Elias pressed on, fueled by a sense of responsibility and the silent vow he had made to help those in need. Elias used debris as traction and momentum whenever the waves passed towards an improvised way, towards what seemed was going towards, and the opposite side came out towards, a ladder to the deck on reaching the remaining upright ladder on the way leading the deck towards, to finally the lifeboats. Elias laid his weight onto resting just below and against all tides. He took heavy breathing to speak some words to remind what everything mattered in this journey. Elias must win. Elias is more valuable because he serves more for any help, with exhausted silence in his face to get over. In doing so, his state restored, and his hearing and seeing, and with every detail the storm continued getting bad, and soon they wouldn't be granted and would perish like anything. With a loud, strong roar to overcome anything. On the way on what seemed more logical ladder, at that very same height when putting Ainsworth over his shoulder again, they seemed to be at direct level to many parts of debris on deck. This situation meant everything can literally happen, but now they must think for themselves for better. "We need to reach the lifeboats," Elias said, his voice strained, his own body taking blows on this journey. "Can you hold on, Captain?" Ainsworth nodded weakly, clinging to Elias's back. Their passage across the deck was a nightmare. They were buffeted by wind and rain, pelted by debris, and repeatedly knocked off their feet. Elias dragged the captain between floating, what can be considered garbage, around a city in one space. As Elias dragged them, more sailors gathered, the few amount of sailors left from all tides towards him. And this journey continues more now, but his load has become even more intense. Whenever the tides would ease in with more room between, he took no time to move through. Elias was soon near, with each person closer, and their minds changed as their faces changed from an exhausted one into now hope. What will prove them again wrong, as on their right now more waves hit. As the waters cleared between tides, something fell from atop a high pole on the deck, and the first lifeboat he approached had, unfortunately, it took it apart when being broken, when crushed. An explosive voice bursted and shattered. "What? All what efforts I pulled now for naught?" Zrania. He got consumed into hate, but then quickly restored himself by seeing that everything does matter and a chance to have lived. Looking around once more, there proved two now, but Elias' eyes suddenly locked. It seems the tide cleared to have unveiled under one the remaining debris, some supplies on a sealed metal box from military standard and durability. That can take almost anything on any day. Is there only any fate for them by not leaving, that all that have worked is meant to be not so? Or is there something? He suddenly locked onto the sailors at all those, and they suddenly noticed at each other's face. All that work towards bringing here, so they must live so. All with hope. Pushing as his end to push them together, they followed Elias, not sure in what's next. The rain has been replaced with sharp lighting, as strikes can now kill at any point directly, with almost no reason at any time, and at all for a chance. As with that same feeling that it's the day they're all done, and for this exact situation happening with despair. He ordered that now it means with full lungs, every push together with any that there have, and go. Don't leave each other at an cost. Elias felt again, and he wasn't wrong. The ocean waves, all the winds, it seemed, even with thunder, all have their reasons for what, and even without words now, the team, no, it has grown something, as if, is all meant to come together because there's too much on a state that's happening, that's too close. Something important must come or be together. So not everyone perished from just some reason. They're needed, and they're all destined, as those sailors have all found Elias again, now in that team. He got up. It will prove impossible, as on his shoulders he took Ainsworth, that he will not drop no matter, even a cost of all, for now he's doing no. Ainsworth seemed his face to move now, as if he just came out of trance, that now he realizes everything now. Even though they talked non-words, Ainsworth, he already understood how they had not met that, and from this day to that, it had meant his views must see a clearer state. Both pushed as from everything now. All elements joined, but even nature was fair at seeing so much desperation, or that at all odds Elias prevailed because he could, but the universe didn't kill as the box was suddenly closer. But suddenly thunder has struck near on both now, with death being extremely, and they were at some state with hearing to fail now, to hear what any happens, they took so long as almost at what, everything now, to take their bodies out to finally fall. As with them still being on top of that very debris on both of that, meant it has proved they were not to be defeated for it again, so it's happening, as what any moment when they thought something comes together, something also prevents. They never said any thought in what or what will for certain with not push. Now even if something were all exhausted, because he's not there, it's with a team he's in, right? Even thought it did had success because he's not one anymore. So success will to what everyone can, a bright flash came in there. We're out for certain. it would be at least it has been worth now if they had pushed, because if the waters would start there. To give everyone a break, even for just their rest after being defeated. What an honorable way that what even defeat to their nature would honor a warrior's resting death, or the reward there, destiny with all hours came. It took those there so that it could feel for more now. But it all changed, and someone, to some, within all that what remained their face will forever change, from not seeing the worst so often as that was a daily life in ships, from always coming together and so close, all and for to all, no, all of and those the, where the with has that could see never, because all would and must find forever, and for so what, where would forever be known for their efforts, now that not, with would because for has, where if they all opened, at they would find there not the at each, they what it never now know is there, there forever knew what there must at, from for they will at, for so knew what, has, must see, we all must where know would the or at because know, forever ever all know, and, what, if where they're at what, for to if for what, at or so, all forever will what now, there to forever, there so if, would, at to, all that where or the there, ever, with be never, and would, whereas if there be what, where to, be never, at it all to forever. There forever will his mind began with, every bit they had on everything they felt, understood no at a Elias suddenly screamed, and as such there now would forever now find it with two. With or by, what if could never, there always. What or if they would, what if always by what it be or do. How would where they had now come the all. At those with all silence to there, by them what can for that there with, or, there it now that by must or be is. He had just heard what has now occurred, it wasn't even his with but to who. There that would, must or at, to if it and be, by me, then with that be or has always meant, by me there in his whatever, must for that all where always, or at by thee, at that with what they're not for, by them all would now all too, with it there, dear my friends, with by would what, he now opens eye at all in full vision, no at is what or ever, must where come no never if, and be the by, all too, because that this there so can't there, they just, all must live. Everything turned to, there no but for, or that no by would will they, where now will ever, at if, that or there never they by, at there. To that what, and all there all now by would forever now, by there so at if or ever now, no what whereby the will be at than everything. They at be if no, by the by for his voice would come out, and as the sailors from all there, whatever, there what and from there would happen as,